Welcome to this installment of Moments with Mike as we continue our journey through the 4th chapter of the book of Jonah. Have you ever thought about the fact that in so many pivotal scenes of the Testaments, both Old and New, we see God asking questions of people? And certainly into the New Testament, we see God in the flesh, Jesus, often asking questions of not just his disciples, but others that he encountered, inviting them, as it were, into a dialogue. You'll recall in Genesis chapter 3 that God spoke to Adam and Eve and said, "Where are you? Where are you?" God spoke in Genesis chapter 4 to Cain and said, "Where is your brother?" And God spoke to Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 13 and said through the prophet, "What have you done?" Here we have 3 times where God asks questions of Jonah in the 4th chapter of the book of Jonah. The first one is in verse 4, when upon hearing that, and observing, I'm sure, that Jonah was angry at God and displeased that God had reached through the message that Jonah himself preached the hearts of the Ninevite people, who then responded in repentance, leading to this revival that we read of in chapter 3. The first time God questions Jonah is found for us in verse 4, and he asks very simply, "Do you do well to be angry?" Trying to draw out from Jonah, trying to get Jonah to look at his own heart and understand what it was in his heart that led him to this place of anger. Of course, we then follow the story through. Jonah in verse 5 goes outside the city, makes a booth for himself there, sits in the shade, wanting to see what would become of the city. It struck me very early in my life as I studied this book that Jonah removing himself from a place of ministry was something that he repeatedly did. Chapter 1, he tries to flee to Tarshish, the farthest known geographic point from where he had been called to go. And here, you would think, after this great revival, that Jonah would then spend time with the people of Nineveh, instructing them in not just the character, but the will and the ways of God. And yet, he removes himself from that sphere of ministry and sits outside the city. And of course, the great story of Jonah continues with the plant that grows over his head, which gives him shade, and then the anger again as God appointed a scorching east wind and a worm to eat that which was giving shelter and shade. And Jonah's response is, "Better for me to die than to live." And God responds to that by saying, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant?" Trying again to get Jonah to take a look at himself and to recognize that his behavior was a total lack of integrity with what he said he knew about God's character in verse 2. And finally, he says that, "Should I not have compassion on this group of people? You had compassion, if you will, for the plant. You didn't cause it to grow. It provided you the shade that you needed. Should I not then," arguing from the lesser to the greater, "should I not then have compassion for these people?" And then, wonderfully descriptive there at the end, he says, "The more than 120,000 people who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle." 3 times, 3 questions, trying to draw Jonah to a place of self-reflection and honest dialogue with God. We would do well when God questions us from the pages of his word or the prompting of his spirit or the counsel of others. We would do well to learn from the 4th chapter of the book of Jonah. God bless you, and we'll see you one more time in Moments of Mike with Jonah, chapter 4.